Cool. So I'm Becca Lipper, and I'm the product designer for static analysis, which is under the umbrella of Secure and Protect. And today I am going over the group level security scanner status widget that we just wrapped up design for. So wanted to start with the problem that we're solving here. So this is Sam. He's a security engineer, and he's responsible for making sure that most of the applications at his company are using security scanning in order to keep the company data and the data of their customers safe. So let's look at what Sam has to do with the current GitLab functionality in order to make sure that security scans are being run on all projects in a given group. So I have a demo group here. And as we all know, there can be, hundreds of projects in a group. Here, we're just dealing with a subgroup that has 5 projects. And you'll see that even with 5 projects, it's still a little bit painful. So again, this is Sam, the security engineer, and he wants to make sure that security scans are being run on all projects in this group. So he may think that he could come into security and compliance and get this information on the dashboard. However, he can't. The information that's shown here is vulnerabilities over time to see if things are trending in the right direction. Obviously, you'd want critical high to be trending down, if not all of them, over 30, 60, and 90 days. And then we have the project security status in terms of grades. So what we have here is projects are graded based on the highest severity vulnerability present. So these 3 projects all have at least one critical vulnerability open. So they receive Fs. This project has a high vulnerability open, so it's currently in the D column. However, there's no way to see whether the scanners have been enabled or not. This is just showing vulnerabilities that are present from the scanners that are enabled, but not which aren't enabled. So so really the only way of confirming whether or not a project has security scanners enabled is to go into each of these projects. Even then, it's a little bit tricky. So let's go into this project, for example. There's kind of 2 ways of accomplishing this. So the first one would be to go into pipelines and look for, we'll use SAST as an example. We could use DAST, container scanning, license compliance, fuzzing, etc. But let's use SAST as an example. So we want to see if SAST is enabled or if SAST jobs are running. There's no way that we could just search for SAST because raw text search is not supported. And there's no filters for that. So what I might do is do Command F on my keyboard and search for the word SAST. I can see that there's some commit messages that do mention SAST. So I could go in here and do some troubleshooting and see, was SAST enabled, or is this just something having to do with SAST? Was SAST part of a longer word? And this is unrelated to static analysis security testing. That is one way of doing this. Another way would be to go into jobs and do the same thing. I can search for SAST and see that GoSec has run. Now, GoSec is one of 14 analyzers that we use as part of our SAST offering. So, I can see maybe that GoSec is running successfully, but in terms of the other 13 analyzers, that's a little bit, that's even more work. So what happens if we go into the security and compliance area? We can go down to configuration and see that which scanners are enabled or not enabled across the project. This isn't necessarily what people might think it is on first glance. As it says here in the description, the status of the table below only applies to the default branch and is based on the latest pipeline. So if the latest pipeline had a failure for SAST, let's say the SAST job or jobs of that pipeline had any errors or didn't run successfully for some reason, this enabled would switch to not enabled. So even though the YAML, the SAST YAML file is present in the project, it switches to not enabled. There's a very large conversation taking place about this, but essentially it boils down to this. So I'll go into it a little bit more here. And I can link to issues where this is an ongoing conversation as well. So this is the current user flow that we just walked through. So we went to GitLab, we selected a group and then selected a project. We went the pipeline or jobs page route where you control F for SAST, click on the pipeline, and then try to figure out if the SAST job ran successfully. You also have to know that the SAST job is under the test stage. So that's like another click and more cognitive wheels turning. Alternatively, you could go to the project's security configuration page. If the scan type says enabled, that's a confirmation that the scanner is running successfully. However, if it says not enabled, as I mentioned before, this can mean one of two things. Either one, the SAST YAML file does not exist in that project, and the call to action there would be to add the SAST YAML file if Sam, is that his name? Yeah, Sam wants SAST to be running on that project. However, it could also mean that the SAST YAML file does exist in the project, but that the last attempt to run it was unsuccessful. So we don't know if SAST was configured correctly until a pipeline runs. So this is why it's based on that latest pipeline. In the case of any errors, this is why we changed the status from enabled to not enabled on that configuration page. However, users don't know if this is a call to action to add the SAST template or to check its configuration and troubleshoot any potential errors in the configuration. So there's another, excuse me, there's another solution that can come from this that is running in parallel that I have an issue open for, where maybe we can say, yes, the file is present, but there were some detected errors that you may want to look into versus there is no SAST YAML file at all. So there's some conversations about that as well. But it's important to understand for the purpose of this widget, the technical constraints that we currently do have. Towards the end of this, I'll show the MVC and then the post MVC that addresses all of this complexity. And I'm sure people have a lot of questions, so we can definitely answer those at the end too, since we have plenty of time here. So the after flow, I'm going to walk through this and then I'll do a demo in a prototype of what this looks like. So we went through the before flow, and now the after flow will be the user goes to GitLab, they select a group, they click on security and compliance in the navigation. They're then on the group level security dashboard and it defaults to an overview tab. They would click on the scan status tab and see the security scanner status widget. What's happening on the back end, system is looking for the most recent security job on a completed pipeline for each project in the group. It pulls in the project name, the relative date of when it ran, the pipeline status, and each security job result. With this information, the user can click on the project name, which would take them to that configuration page where they could enable SAST if it's not enabled, for example. They could also click on the pipeline number or the pipeline badge And this would take them to the pipeline page. If it's a failed pipeline, for example, they may want to look into why it failed. They could click on a failed status job icon, which would take them to the pipeline page, and more specifically, the failed jobs tab of that pipeline page. So they can look into the failed job and why it failed and troubleshoot that. Or they could click on a job with the other statuses of success, passed with warnings, or skipped. And that would take them to the pipeline page as well. So let's see what this looks like. I just deleted that. That's not what I wanted. Okay, here we go. So this prototype, by the way, starts at this group level security dashboard. So by this point, user has come to GitLab and selected a group, and then they've navigated to the security and compliance area of the navigation. So this is what they're currently seeing, those dashboard widgets that we looked at earlier. You can see they've been developed a little bit further. This is also a little bit of a future state. There's development working on this right now to expand the functionality and usability of those tables as well. So what we've added up top is this scan status widget here. The reason we're putting this on a new tab is because these widgets here will all fall under a page wide or a tab wide, I guess, filter. And we wanted to be able to customize different filters for the security scan status widget. So user would click on scan status, and then they'd be able to see all of the projects in the group and the latest completed pipeline run on the default branch of each project where at least one security job ran or tried to run. So you can see for project A, this pipeline failed 5 minutes ago, and here are the job results. So it's essentially that pipeline page, but filtered down to a security perspective, which our persona Sam, the security engineer, security analyst, they have a number of different titles. This is really what he cares most about. So from here, I can see, did the job run at all? If it ran, what was the status? I can hover over these icons and see which analyzer type. In this case, it's Brakeman is one of our SAST analyzers. It tried to run, but it failed. So I can click on that job and be taken directly to the failed jobs tab of that pipeline. I can also hover over any other status and click on those as well, and just go to the pipeline page where I can see all of the jobs that ran in all the stages. I can also click on the pipeline failed and look into maybe why this failed. I can also click on the project name, and this would let me see, within the restrictions that we have, what's listed as enabled or not enabled for each scan type. I can also, from this page, apply filters. So let's say that I only want to see where SAST jobs failed. I can say SAST, and then, or where SAST didn't run. Okay, I just realized that let's pretend this says SAST failed. I prototyped up the wrong thing. So if this says SAST scan status failed, then it would only filter by the projects where a SAST job failed. But you could do the same thing for not found. And that's essentially, it's a bit of a workaround to see where SAST isn't enabled. But there could also be other reasons for SAST not being found. It's possible that SAST is enabled, but it didn't run on that latest pipeline. For example, if it's a DAST on-demand scan, it is possible that SAST wouldn't show up in that pipeline run, but SAST is enabled. So there's a lot of tricky what ifs in this whole situation, as you're seeing. But we did do solution validation on this in user testing. And we do have a number of customers currently who have asked for this and have actually used our APIs to come up with tables of their own, essentially showing this information. So while it's not perfect, it is a worthwhile MVC, we've determined. So this is what we have for MVC. We are looking past MVC into something a little bit more ideal, where we would have, let me try to zoom in a little bit on this one. So where we would have, I knew that was going to happen. That's just going to be like that. So we would be able to see the scanner status, and it's either on or off, enabled or not enabled. So that's essentially, does that SAST YAML file exist? Does that DAST YAML file exist? And then separate out any errors on those jobs under that scan type separately. Something else that could be really cool and valuable in this post MVC version is we are introducing a policies page soon, where users can specify, I want SAST to run at least once a month, at least once a week. And if that policy is violated, we could call that out in this widget. So you might be able to see under last scan here, which is maybe something that we default to we default the sort by to last scan, so that these badges would show up at the top. You can see it says 1 month overdue, 1 week overdue. And so that's basically saying, hey, there's a policy set. SAST, you'd be able to click in there and see exactly which policy is being violated or which scanner needs to run. In addition, we could list the vulnerabilities currently open for that project. And so that's a little bit more future state, but we wanted to get out the MVC with what we currently have. So I've linked to the MVC issue and the post MVC issue in the UX showcase agenda, and they're also at the bottom in the presenter notes of these slides. So that's what I have for you. Does anyone have any questions?
I do. I'll start with a thank you. Thank you for doing this live, first of all.
Sure.
And then also, you did an excellent job of setting us up by building our empathy for this user. So really
Awesome.
nice job on
Thanks.
that.
Cool.
Now I just have some tactical design questions. Can you talk about why we've put scan status on its own tab? Mm-hmm. And do you have any concerns about discoverability of hiding what seems like very important information behind kind of dashboard view that doesn't honestly have a whole lot on it right now?
Sure. Yeah. So Andy, I know, has a number of widgets. He's got a huge vision for what that security dashboard will look like. He has a lot of designs in the backlog that I think the team is trying to get to frantically right now. So this is a snapshot of what the future of this page will look like, hopefully in the near future. But there will be more widgets added to this page, and essentially the vulnerability, what is their name of that group? Threat Insights or vulnerability, I'm blanking on the other name right now, but it's Matt, and Matt Wilson is the PM and Andy is the designer that he works with. They wanted to be able to put widgets on this page that all apply to this filter at the top. So I did originally propose to put the security scan status widget on this main page. They're the ones that really pushed for putting it on a new tab because they have a vision for the widgets that go onto this page. And we couldn't figure out a way to allow for new filters only for one widget without that feeling kind of clunky, because they want to put filters at the top of this page that apply to every widget that they're adding. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. That was a very thoughtful answer from you. Something I'd be thinking about is, it's going to take us time to get to this view. And I'd be thinking about whether, well, do we start with everything on one screen? And then as we add widgets, maybe we break it off into its own tab. And then users already know that it exists. They're maybe more likely to actually look for it. So this would be some of the things I'd be thinking through. But obviously, I don't know the answer. I'm just poking holes.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, it does kind of touch on a larger conversation about like discoverability of new features. I know that there's been some discussions in the UX department about, are we doing a little indicator dot calling attention to new areas of the UI? Do we add a banner at the top of this page saying, hey, there's a new, tab. You should go check out this new widget in the new tab. I think there are some possibilities there. Release posts, things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good conversation. I know that there's been some discoverability issues when it comes to those tabs as well. So it's definitely something that we should consider. And I could also do solution validation on that and see if people notice the tab. Because when I did do solution validation on the widget, it was just on the widget itself. And it wasn't on discoverability from this page and having to click into a new tab. So that is something I will include as part of the post MVC. I'll make sure that discoverability is there, and then we can revisit that conversation.
I think that's great. I think you're causing me to take an even more critical look at the visual design. And you didn't say this directly, but you kind of hinted around it. The design of our tabs is visually really, really muted. And it kind of almost runs into our header because it's like there's text and then there's little text, but that's actually really important text. And there's really not a whole lot of visual distinction there. And so maybe that's something we should be thinking about. Okay, thank you. That's a really good answer. Okay, another just tactical question. Is there a reason why we're limiting the view on the scan status tab to 5 projects per screen? That seems like a really small number.
Oh, sorry. This just may be a prototype limitation. There would be 20 projects per page, and then there's a scrollable area. If it goes past 20, there's a stepper at the bottom. So I have this all broken down in the Figma file, which is in the issue. This is my Figma link to the design handoff, and then I copy and pasted a lot of the images in here as well. So we have tab 2 with pagination. So this area is scrollable, expanded. It essentially looks like this. So there are 20 projects per page. And then if there's more than 20, there would be pagination at the bottom.
Got it. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pedro.
Yeah, thank you, Becca. Great presentation. I'm really excited about this. Seems like a very useful feature. To Christy's point about the discoverability, have you considered adding to the overview tab an overview widget with just a high level information of the scans? And then users can drill down and look at this more complex view if they want to understand what is failing. And maybe another idea could be to add a badge with a counter of, I don't know, scans that are failing. But I'm not I didn't understand very well. Maybe you talked about this. What security analysts are looking for? Because for me, as someone who doesn't, who's not very familiar with this, I look at this table with a lot of icons, red, green, yellow, and I don't know what to look for. I mean, I see that some things are failing. Do I need to fix the failing pipelines or the failing jobs, or yeah?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, I think this goes back to, I mean, this is very much an MVC. We have talked to some customers who have taken our API data and created a table like this, and they said, even this suffices. We just want to see what's running, and if it's running, you know, what's running successfully or not. So just to even be able to see that, you know, ideally, if I'm Sam and I want all of the security scan types enabled across all of my projects, I want to see all green check marks across this whole table. So anything that's a lack of an icon or an icon that is not a green check mark, essentially, is going to be a call to action for me.
Right. So would it be able to surface that? Like if there's just even one failing job, surface that more clearly and de-emphasize all of the other projects that are not that are working well. And maybe again in the overview tab, like saying, hey, you have one project where there are failing tests. Go look at this. It seems a really important thing to do.
Sure. Yeah. I think what I'm hearing you say is maybe it's even another widget that we could put on that main page of just showing, yeah, number of failed jobs. It it gets a little bit tricky because you can you can set some jobs to cause the pipeline to fail. But sometimes you can allow for failure as well. I know Camelia has worked on some issues there. There's a lot of complexity within here that I didn't want to try to address all of the things. I know something else that we will often hear as well is green check mark. Some people who are less familiar with security in a CI/CD setting where it's pipeline based, they think that green check marks mean everything's good
okay
here. Yeah, no vulnerabilities found, and that's not at all what it means. It means, hooray, this ran successfully, and we found, you know, 5 critical vulnerabilities, maybe, which is a weird yay but bad kind of mixed emotional state. And so I'm trying.
I think that's a very interesting finding. I would assume that maybe for security, you would have to switch that around and prioritize showing like jobs failed or jobs have resulted in these vulnerabilities, and not so much like it passed or not, because it can induce in error. So I think that's something that would be very interesting, is to change how we display this information, and not so much from a pipeline standpoint, because it's not very useful. It's more useful to know like the pipeline failed or the pipeline produced these vulnerabilities. If everything is working, we don't need to talk much about it. So I think my comment is more food for thought about how, like, we're giving this amazing information and there's a lot of useful information here, but I don't think we're doing a good service to the user to emphasize or highlight what they need to do, because there are the tools there. You added those filters at the top, which are very useful, but the user needs to do that work. They need to scan the lists and use their brain every time they come here to make decisions. And I was wondering if there are good defaults or good things that we can highlight by default for them.
Sure.
So food for thought. We don't need to discuss this now.
Sure.
Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it'd be interesting to see Pedro and Becca have a quick working session where they just maybe went through some quick ideations, sketch them out. Because Pedro, I can see where your brain is heading, and if you were able to draw it out a little bit for Becca, she might go, oh, okay, and then she's got all of this tactical knowledge around what our technical limitations are. That might really up level the design, but within the constraints of an MVC and our current technical limitations.
Yeah, I definitely do see the value. I mean, the way that we've talked about this within Secure is, well, we have a different area of the navigation for the vulnerability report where we can see the vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities are also being surfaced in every MR, where, we're, especially if there's security approvals enabled, that essentially will block the MR from being merged without a security approver coming in and making sure that those vulnerabilities are triaged, or that they can be dismissed because they're actually low risk. So yeah, the way that we've been thinking about this is, this is not vulnerabilities detected. This is, are things working as they should be? And then dealing with vulnerabilities later, right? Because I mean, you could look at the vulnerability report, which has the list of current vulnerabilities open on the project. And that's also a little bit of a confusing emotional mixed state, because if that's at 0 and there's no vulnerabilities, that could be a great thing. That could mean that only secure code is being shipped and the developers are doing their due diligence to make sure that there's no loopholes in the code at all. There's no, secrets, secret detection is running and it's not picking up any potential secrets. And or that, maybe there were a couple of vulnerabilities, but they were all triaged and patched. However, it could also mean that an empty state on the vulnerability report could mean that security scans just aren't running. And so it's not necessarily a good thing, or that they're enabled, but the configuration of the scanner got so convoluted and it broke somewhere along the way, because configuring security scans is a complex process, which is something else that we've tried to address in SAST with this configuration UI. We're trying to encourage configuration within a from a place where we can like add some logic for them without the pipeline running and turning up errors. So, this is MVC as well, but a future state, if I put something in here and try to configure one of these variables and it would break, ideally the system says, hey, that's going to break things. So my wheels are turning and I'm going in 100 different directions right now. And I'm trying to get back to the original question, but everything kind of goes into everything else. So
we've thrown a ton at you, so don't. Yeah, you probably do need to process all of this. Don't feel bad about that. Just feel free.
I would love this. I would love to sync with you, Pedro. I do think that you're on to something there, and it does sound very valuable. So let's definitely sync outside of this.
Yeah, if you feel like it's we're at the right moment to diverge a little bit, I'm open to that. So it all depends on the level of confidence and where we're at in the iteration timeline. So yeah,
I think at the least we could start to put some ideas in this post MVC issue that I have, or I mean, depending on what comes out of it, if it's like another widget that could run in parallel as the MVC issue as well. So let's think and see what comes of it.
Looks like Camellia has a comment.
Yeah, I was just like thinking on this kind of idea. I think it's possible that we give users some indication to have like overall like pipeline status or job status on the main dashboard as indication to check. And just elaborate a little bit on the allow failure feature, that when user consciously turn it on, turn it off, it's kind of their choice. If they turn allow failure on, that means they want to, they think it's okay that if vulnerability found and job is failed, but the pipeline still pass. So they, on the pipeline level, they don't want to pay attention to it. They want to see it pass, but on the job level, they do want to see it fail. So they have different choice on like prioritization of the attention they want to pay attention to pipelines and jobs. So I think it's their choice. And on the dashboard, the idea could be we have two small widgets, says, hey, you have how many failed jobs, you have how many failed pipelines, and it's their decision to check which one. And I remembered, like probably Andy has the future plan that for this widget, you can add a widget, remove widget, you don't have to turn on all the widgets we provide. So that could be like in the future, some customized idea that we have.
Awesome. So I want to leave time for Camelia's presentation as well. I'll point out that Christy said that your knowledge of your area, Becca, is excellent. So thank you so much for sharing with all of us.